Hello, this is Rob from Singletrack, and what you have here in front of me are two trail bikes that I've had on test for the past couple of months. We have the GT Sensor Expert and the Trek Fuel EX 9.7. Now on paper, both these bikes are very similar. They both run 29-inch wheels, they both run 130mm travel front and rear, and they both have a frame build of a carbon mainframe and an alloy rear triangle. On paper, very similar bikes, but out on the trails, two very different stories. One feels very raw, ready to ride, out of the box is an absolute riot. The other, on the other hand, is a lot more sophisticated. It feels higher end, higher quality, and you feel like you've got to take a little bit more care when you're riding it. So let's get into it. Let's start with the GT then. The GT Sensor is a new bike for this year. It's a remake of the Sensor model that's been around for a while now, but uses a much simpler suspension design away from that AOS and the iDrive system of old, and it's been replaced with a 4-bar linkage design, which is very simple. On the trails then, this bike feels incredibly raw. It's a carbon frame, like I said, with an alloy rear triangle, and on the trails it just wants to impress you. It wants to have fun. On the climbs it feels very firm and very supportive as you're riding up things. There's plenty of traction, and on the descents, if you let off those brakes, the bike just absolutely flies. Couple of drawbacks on the GT. The spec in certain areas might be compromised. I think GT have spent a lot of time developing and making this lovely carbon frame, but then in terms of the spec, the little things that just aren't up to speed. The brakes are SRAM level TLs, and they're just not quite powerful enough. On longer descents, you really do start to pull through that travel, and it does become a bit of a chore trying to stop. The dropper post, again, is something that could look at tweaking in the future. So this bike is available in 5 models, 2 alloy models and 3 carbons. This sits in the middle of the 3 carbon models, and is priced at £3,299. Onto the Trek then, and what have we got here? Again, a carbon front triangle and alloy rear triangle. This bike uses Fox suspension front and rear, unlike the RockShox system that GT uses. We've got SRAM drivetrain, again similar to the GT. This uses an NX front shifter coupled with a GX Eagle rear mech, and we've got Shimano M6000 brakes. On the trail, this bike feels super high-end. The carbon frame has loads of technology, from the knock block system down to the minnow link to adjust the geometry. Similar with the GT, this also has a flip chip to change the geometry slightly when you're on the trail. On the trail then, the Trek feels very high-end. It feels very supple through the suspension, and it's a very, very agile bike. Out of the box, this bike comes with a 750mm wide bar, which for a bike that is this capable does feel very narrow. I swapped this over to something a little bit wider, and it has transformed the bike. On the climbs, the reactive rear shock really does work its magic. When you're on undulating trails, it feels supportive, and then as soon as you get out of the saddle to punch up steep climbs, it firms up and gives you plenty of traction. And the bike as a whole just feels very comfortable. The suspension throughout on all different trail types is incredibly supple, and it is an absolute hoot to ride. So both these bikes then are an absolute pleasure on the trail. They're both super quick pointed downhill and are very active when they're going uphill. They make life very easy, in fact. But how are the differences when they're actually riding then, and what feels better and what do I prefer? Well, I really like the raw nature of the GT. It feels like it just wants to impress you all the time, and the fact that you don't have to worry about loads of different types of technology means that you can just get out and ride your bike. On the Trek, however, you do go out and you do think about all the different changes you could make. Obviously, they've both got a flip chip kind of setup for adjusting the geometry, but the active braking pivot on here, the knock block system, all the different internal cable routing options on the Trek just make it a little bit more complex in my eyes. That being said though, on the trail, I have preferred the ride of the Trek. That supple suspension design just gives you a lot more control when you're riding and gives you a bit more feedback when you're on the trail. The firmer suspension on the GT is perfect if you're riding bike parks and harder packed trails. That being said though, there are a few drawbacks to the GT. Those brakes just aren't powerful enough for a bike that is this capable and wants to go this fast, and there are a few other areas in the build kit where I think money could have been spent better. Onto the Trek, I think the build kit out of the box is spot on. I think the way that Trek have intelligently thought about the group set has really made an impact on the way it rides. Having a cheaper GX rear mech rather than something like the X01 just means that you have that peace of mind. If you do take a whack, you're not going to have to be spending 500 odd pounds on a new rear mech. And I think that some of the other features on the Trek do just make it that little bit higher up in terms of its ride quality. Looking at price points then, and where do these two bikes sit? Well, the GT retails at £3,299, whereas the Trek retails at £3,150. And for that extra £150, I don't really see what you get. I think GT has spent a lot of time and money designing this lovely carbon frame, and it is a work of art, but I think the money spent in that does reflect in the price that you buy it off the shelf. For £150 less, I do think the Trek is a better option. So both these bikes are great options for if you're looking to upgrade your bike or get into the trail bike market. If you want to read the full reviews of both bikes, head over to singletrackworld.com, where I've broken them down in all the details, and there's a video for each of those as well. If you like this video and want to see more, make sure you click subscribe and like down below. Add any comments that you want to know and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. But for the time being, this has been Rob from Singletrack with the GT Sensor Expert and the Trek Fuel EX 9.7, and we'll see you all very soon. Cheers!